If you like the superhero movie like me, you know that the people, superheroes, can do impossible things that average human beings like us cannot do. So I'll give you an example. People who shoot laser from their eyes, right? Or people who can read the minds and control people with just mind power. There are some people who is able to take bullets and be fine. Some people are so powerful who can lift up a whole truck with the people inside. Wow. And also some people, superheroes, can move in light speed. And some people can even turn time back. They're all extraordinary. People who do the impossible things that we cannot normally do. I like superhero movies because it let me imagine a world where we can do impossible things. Can you imagine if you can read the minds of other people? Or moving at the speed of light. Wouldn't it be amazing to turn back time? That would be amazing, right? Amazing. Speaking of which, speaking of impossible things, our Bible is also filled with impossible things, extraordinary people and things and events. And today we'll look at one of them. And the story begins with Abraham and his wife, Sarah. God called Abraham, previously known Abram, to leave his home and all his relatives behind and go to the land that God will show him. God promised that if he obeys, Abraham, will become the source of all blessing to the people. And he will become the forefather of a whole nation. That's an incredible blessing. So he left his home countries, Haran, all the way to Shechem. That's 650 kilometers. You take him literally years. He leaves anyway. He leaves. By then, Abraham was 75 years old. He was a very old man. And his wife, 65. However, despite all this, Abraham believed in God's promise and left. Well, unfortunately, things did not go well when they finally got there. When they finally got there, he quickly realized that the land was not free for taking. There were already a lot of people, nations, countries living there. And God promised Abraham to give this land to him. The worst thing is, a huge famine struck. The food was gone, the water dried up, there was nothing to eat or drink. The cattle and the animals started to die. And the worst thing is, Abraham was 85 and Sarah 75, and they still did not have a child. And God promised them that they will be the forefather of not just a family, but whole nation. Things were not looking so good. But God come back to Abraham and promised them, hey, remember, you'll be the father of a whole nation. You'll be the father of many people. People will be blessed through you, and this land will be yours. Another 14 years go by. And by then, Abraham is how old? He's 99. He's already 99 years old. And his wife, how old? 89. They have been waiting for 24 years, longer than what you have lived. 24 years. For the promise to come true, for this land to be theirs, and for them to have children, a lot of children, become father and mother of a nation. Nothing happened. And things were looking so grim, they became impossible. They pretty much gave up. But then one day, 3 visitors come by and stop by their house. They were men sent by God. And Abraham welcomes them in, gives them a lot of food and water and place for them to rest. And then one of them tells this news, a great news. And says, I'll return to you about this time next year. So when he's about 100 years old. Okay? Next year. And your wife, Sarah, will have a son. Hey, that's a good news, right? After 25 years, for them to finally have a son, that's incredible news, mind-blowing. But it's so incredible, so extraordinary, so impossible. It's really hard to believe. Really hard to believe. So Sarah, who was quietly eavesdropping on the conversation in the back, laughed to herself and said, hey, how could a worn-out woman like me, I mean, she's already 89, enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also sold. So she's just laughing and thinking to herself, yeah, right. Yeah, right. Sure, of course. I will have a son next year and you will turn into a frog. Yeah. Wouldn't you do the same thing when you hear that kind of news? I mean, she was not only one who laughed at this. Abraham also laughed at God. If you look at the chapter before, chapter 17, God tells him the same news to Abraham. Abraham, you will be father of a son, and you will call this son Isaac. And he's still 99 years old. You know what Abraham did? Yeah, Abraham bowed down to the ground, but he laughed to himself in disbelief. Laughed. Yeah, right. How could I become a father at the age of 100? He thought. And how can Sarah have a baby when she's 90 years old? Wouldn't you? Right? Let's say a person comes by and say, hey, you can fly now. A year from now on, you grow wings in the back, you'll be finally able to fly. Didn't you always want that? Would you say, wow, really? Nice!
No.
Next year, I will fly over to Korea. Yes, I'll just wait for a year.
No.
Thanks for the great news, man. No. I'll say, what? What's that? Are you crazy? Out of your minds? Well, that's what they did, Abraham and Sarah. They just could not believe it. It was so impossible. Well, a year after, when Abraham turned 100 and Sarah turned 90, they had a son. And Abraham named him Isaac. When Sarah finally gave birth to Isaac, and this is what she said, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this, we will laugh. I mean, wouldn't you laugh? Sarah could not believe her eyes. Even when her belly was like getting bigger and bigger, I bet Sarah could not believe her own eyes. She couldn't believe it. So she just laughed. Is this true? Is this true? Well, sometimes God's promise can be so hard, really hard for us to believe too. Right? God promised the Israelites to bring them back from their slavery. And He did so by striking Egypt with 10 plagues. And He opened the Red Sea. And they walked. He promised that our Savior will be born unto a virgin. And Jesus was born to Mary, who was a virgin. Jesus promised His disciple to come back to life after 3 days. He's dead. Disciples could not believe it. When Jesus was crucified, they all left. They all fled because they could not believe. But after 3 days, what happened? Jesus came back to life. Came back from the grave to meet him. No matter how impossible it might sound to you, God always keeps His promise. Jesus promised to be with us all the time. And Jesus promised that He will come back to bring us back to heaven. Sometimes that might be hard to believe. You might not see Jesus around the corner. Maybe you are so let down, you're depressed, you're sad, you're angry, that you don't feel like that God is with you and for you and helping you out. But know it to be true.
Excuse me?
God is keeping promise by being with you. Know that God keeps His promise with you. And He will never let you alone. Let me pray.